Kenya needs at least 500 billion to successfully restore all degraded land in the country through the ongoing tree planting campaign in the next 10 years. So the funding gap was addressed by CS Environment Soipan Tuya and CS Treasury Professor Njuguna Ndung'u at the COP28 in Dubai. The CSs who were speaking on the sidelines of the conference called on climate justice activists to be patient as a framework on climate financing funds so far been pledged may take time to be realized. As Mashirima Kapombe now reports, all this happening on a day that also marked themes on gender and contribution of the youth and vulnerable groups to the climate change space.
Africa's crying.
It was a day of activism at COP28 as different organizations staged protests calling on the implementation of promises made in previous sessions of the United Nations Conference on Climate Change.
Africa,
through song and slogans on their expectations, the youth called on African leaders to involve them in climate decisions and speak in one voice.
Eza kueleza viongozi wakienda kule kufanya negotiations wakumbuke masuala yale ambayo yana affect wale ambao wako kule mashinani.
Following the negotiations, I believe some African countries are standing for us. I would encourage even more to continue having a united voice.
Their call echoing Kenya's finance priorities on restoring land that is degraded through the 15 billion tree growing campaign in 10 years. Kenya requires 500 billion shillings to successfully implement the 15 billion trees in 10 years campaign. CS Environment calling on partners to support the initiative.
And we are talking about blended finance. It is not money that will just come to the table from one source. Kenya has its part to play.
You should note that there is a gestation period in terms of tree growing, isn't it? You have to plant and then you grow in the trees and then to the level of where it is going to mature to give you the results that you want. So that gestation period, you have to take care of it starting now.
The campaign that has received accolades from the World Bank has heavily been criticized by climate justice organizations who insist African leaders should instead push harder to access loss and damage funds to cater to the vagaries of climate change that Africans like those in Kenya are currently experiencing.
Kenya is doing something that nobody else is doing, which is thinking at a national level. Thinking about its restoration strategy, not as a plan, not as a product, not as something that you're going to create and you're going to put on the tables of development partners, but as a process, bringing together everybody. It's a whole of government, whole of society approach to taking control of your own future, to creating a climate prosperity plan, to turn climate from being a threat to an opportunity to grow.
Therefore, we are calling for all parties, and especially the high polluters, to actually honor their commitments and avail especially the most needed climate finance for the continent.
The CS is calling for patience as access to loss and damage funds may not be as quickly available as the pledges made.
The global stocktake has just been done, but when you look at the adaptation aspect, it is not very clear for me. Why? Because there has not been sufficient focus on adaptation. We want that focus to go to adaptation. We want to see clear targets for adaptation like we are seeing in mitigation, because with clear targets, then you can measure the impact.
When we talk about the framework being concluded, it means that it is going to define the uses and the final uses, isn't it? So let's wait for that framework. Let's not be in a hurry, because essentially we have taken a lot of time, you can imagine, and when we go to the nitty-gritty details, the framework will be clear. But let's not rush by now starting to apportion what should be done. This is too early to say that.
The CS is expressing optimism that by the end of the conference next week, a clear roadmap will have been established. Mashirima Kapombe, Citizen TV, Dubai.